when I look at engineers, the thing is they are builders. They'll say, "Oh my God, this is cool technology. Let's go ahead and let's do the maximum we can with it," without thinking through the privacy issues and the privacy and other downside risks of. So we have a society where on one hand you have a lot of lawyers who work focused on the risk. We have some builders who are focused on the upsides. We do not have enough conversations between the engineers and the lawyers. Uh, we have tried at FOSS United to rectify that to some extent by sponsoring engineers to do the Takshashila Tech Policy course. And we are right now in the 6th batch of it. And this is an advertisement for all the FOSS enthusiasts here in this audience to apply for the Takshashila FOSS United Scholarship. We sponsor about 80% of the fees. So advertisement over. So the question to you is, how do we get more engineers interested in public policy? And 10 years down the line, what is the best case scenario if we have engineers interested in public policy? And what's the worst case scenario if we do not have enough engineers interested?
I wish this conversation was a couple of weeks back, then I could have also advertised IIT PhD deadlines are unfortunately over. If any of you wanted to apply to CPS as a PhD student. But it's very interesting the picture you have painted, that on one hand we have engineers who like to make things, on the other hand we have lawyers who like to question things. But the reality is that both the engineers and lawyers are working for paycheck, right? They are both controlled by the market, so to speak. So the freedom of the engineer to build things is more or less an illusion. There's the first depressing thing you would learn, by the way, when all of you get a job, that all the stuff you are learning here, all these, like, like I learned for 5 years the most sophisticated machine learning models. Then I went to a company and used embedding systems, static ones at that. So, wo hoga aapke saath. Like, you will realize that most of what you learn as an engineer doesn't really matter, because the market is what will control what you get to build. Similarly, if you are a lawyer, you may go into the profession with very high-minded ideals about protecting the constitution, etc. But what you will end up is like minimizing the risk for some corporate boss, more or less. So it's not a question of engineers versus lawyers, but to me it has always been a question of engineers and lawyers versus MBAs. Like people who actually control the purse strings. And the problem is that the engineers and the lawyers, they are so good at what they do that they often don't know how the world works. They often do not understand that intellectual freedom is not a thing, for example. Market freedom is a thing. Intellectual freedom is constrained by that. They often do not understand that the idea of a lone genius working hard in a lab and creating products is bunk. There is no such thing. People do not, you do not, create the things you create. It is a labor of society which goes into teaching you, and then you are merely mediums. It takes a while to realize that, but everybody eventually realizes that they are a cog in the machine. At which point the question arises, is the machine a good machine, or do I want to change how it works? So, for example, if there is complete apathy towards the machine, what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that you all optimize for somebody else's yacht, somebody else's profit, and as the internet calls you, you remain wage eats all your life. And the problem with that is that you essentially end up enabling a world which is not just harmful to your personal self-interest, but to the social interest. And you will be victims of that world as well. We have been seeing, even at IIT, what was the placement rate last year, right? Technology has an impact on society, no matter, again, like, you may think that you don't care and you just want the peace and quiet to sit somewhere and write nice code, but that's not how reality works. So, if you want to intervene in reality, you would at least, if not like join his course or join my department, at least be interested in policy and politics. And by the way, policy and politics are more or less the same thing. If you think you are apolitical, you are wrong. Nobody is apolitical in this room, just that some people are not aware of their politics. Everybody is very political in this room. Like if you think you are apolitical, you are deluding yourself, right? So it is better to be self-aware about your politics rather than saying that I am apolitical. I am just an engineer, I just want to do science, I am apolitical. That's not a thing. Aata dal ka bhav, transformer chips, everything is political. If you then decide that I want to change this system to something which is good for people, where people have the liberty to produce what they want, have the equity to be treated the same as any other person, to have a life which is not just life but has dignity, you need to take part. And these things are really fast. Few years back, nobody in India cared about, privacy, for example. Privacy was considered to be something a foreign thing. It was wrong, by the way, many people cared, but it was a very well-constructed image that Indians don't care about privacy. And then certain things happened, electronic IDs became common, scraping data online, and then people started to realize, oh, my data is being stolen. But yes, this battle was fought 10 years back, and you lost the battle without even realizing you were part of the battle. There were battles which were won as well. How many of you were old enough to remember the whole thing on net neutrality? That happened, and the public did intervene and did end up winning. So what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that you end up living in a reality where you have zero agency, where everything from your education to your job to your ability to exercise political will is more or less controlled or nullified, where democratic agency doesn't exist, where freedom of speech is a nice illusion at best, where the political process exists. There are elections, there is democracy, but that democracy is a ritual you do every 5 years. That's the worst case scenario, and technology will enable that unless controlled, stopped, regulated. And I know everybody in this room hates that word, right? Regulation. I am the regulator. I'm the guy with the red tape. So over my dead body before you get your libertarian utopia, and I fight you. That's the thing, right? That I believe in things. Interestingly enough, it's good to believe in things. Like the problem is that we have come to a technological reality where people think that it's cool to not care, and that's bad. It's good to believe and disagree rather than be apathetic. Apathy is the enemy of civilization.
Very well said. Apathy is the enemy of civilization. And the worst case scenario that you painted kind of is a nice segue to my next question. And today, all of us take our freedom to program for granted. I mean, the 4 freedoms of FOSS are something that we live and die by. But at the same time, what we are seeing now in the ecosystem, in the Indian ecosystem, is that software is getting increasingly patented. We've been reviewing a bunch of software patents. We've been reviewing a bunch of AI patents, which are nothing more than regular business methods. So, for example, somebody has filed a patent on social media marketing, and all it does is recite a series of steps, and it sprinkles the word AI in a few select places, and that person says, I deserve to get a 20-year monopoly on this idea. Somebody has actually received a patent on online voting. So next time, assuming the Indian elections become online, the Election Commission of India might have to pay that patent holder royalty for enabling you to cast your vote. So I think these are the kind of challenges that we are seeing, and essentially AI patents are all algorithm patents. They are basically business rules that are codified into software. In your view, should that be patented, or it should not be patented?
You're asking a Marxist, should more things be made into market commodities? No. No. Patents shouldn't take, IP should be torn into shreds. This is the, okay, I will not go into, I will not climb on the desk and pull out a red flag from somewhere, but these are bad, even for all of you. We are looking at the commodification of the commons. Code used to be for everybody, and it should be. Like the ideals of the free software movement are worth protecting. And what is important to understand is that a lot of these patents are frivolous and malicious. They are attempts to sort of flag plant your way to creating property out of something which is not property. And I hope that the FOSS community resists that, because um, we saw the same thing with other digital artifacts in the past. Things which were part of the commons suddenly became property of FANG without much pushback because nobody realized what was happening. As an AI person, I look at a lot of these AI patents and they are bad. They are not patenting innovations, they are patenting generalized ideas which anybody can come up with. And yeah, I don't like it, and I hope that there is concerted effort to wage war against frivolous patenting, but I believe we don't have a lot of time left.
So the Marxist point that you mentioned, I really have to say this in this room. In 2005, there was a proposal to amend the Section 3K of the Indian Patent Act to say that technical effects of software will be patentable subject matter. We then went to the Communist Party of India, CPIM, Communist Party of India Marxist, and they at that time had 54 MPs in the UPA 1 government. And of course, sadly not true anymore. But they supported us. We also spoke to the BJP. They also supported us. This was the Manmohan Singh government at that time. And we pushed back and got it changed to what it reads today, which is that Section 3K today reads mathematics, business methods, computer programs per se and algorithms cannot be patented. One big mistake we made was that we did not delete per se from Section 3K, and because of that, the lawyers have come up with some unusual interpretations of computer programs per se. Another advertisement, we have a website called endsoftwarepatents.in, and we did a study to examine what happens if you're a startup running a company and you're sued for software patents. Somebody says, I own a patent on one-click shopping or whatever. How much will it cost you? Anybody wants to take a guess as to, if you were to defend yourself from a software litigation, how much it will cost you? If you read the article, don't say it, but it'll cost you at least 3 crores if you want to fight it to the bitter end. So imagine you're a startup who's raised 1 or 2 crores in seed capital. I mean, where will you have the money to, spend 3 crores on long-drawn litigation? So yeah, these are the kind of challenges. Let me quickly then, go to the audience and see if there are any questions for Anupam. I think we have time for about 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah, so like a very recent concern, I guess, is that the Indian government wants traceability from any, I don't know what the word they use, but essentially, providers like WhatsApp and things like that. So, first of all, I think this is a very bad idea because that just big slippery slide there. But apart from that, I was wondering, like, does this actually apply to, let's say you make an application for email that encrypts your email messages with PGP, GPG, whatever. Do you count as an intermediary? Are you required to give this traceability? And where do you think this thing will lead? Because I think, first of all, it's a bad thing. It's also like a very poorly thought out problem because it's very technically infeasible to do this without hobbling the application itself. So basically, I want to get your thoughts on where this is going and whether my question on the intermediary.
So I'm assuming that you haven't read my very angry rant in a newspaper against this. I wrote one when this whole thing happened. It all started, I believe, with the proposed amendments to the Telecommunication Act bill, where they said that any machine-to-machine communication, we need to know who is doing it and who it is using. See, if you, again, like I believe these are political, not technical battles. And in politics, in the old-fashioned understanding of the word liberty, there is something called the right to be forgotten. Like if the state knows everything you do, and now you are probably thinking, ये तो वामपंथी है तो state के कैसे समझ आएगा तुमको? So the state should not be aware of everything you do without due cause, and due cause generally means harm you do to other people or things you do. So if you start to place in the public domain that you intend to reverse that you intend to know what people are doing without due cause, that itself is a policy problem. Whether or not that is feasible is not even the question, because feasibility is something that can be worked over time. So you need to start opposing it when the idea comes out that, you know what, and this idea could become as ridiculous as, can we have KYC for emails? You may giggle about it, it may happen. At that time you won't be able to giggle about it. So you should start to scream when it happened, like 2 years back when that draft amendment came out. You should have spammed the ministry with emails and letters. I did try to rabble rouse and I did say that people should do that, but मैंने चिट्ठी लिखी थी. So the point is that these are political battles. You need to have a politics clear that freedom is not negotiable, like old-fashioned politics on these things. And don't try to, sort of think about these in terms of feasibility, technical feasibility. Is this even doable? Because yeah, sure, it's not doable, but then they would say all Discord server moderators need to have a license from the government, which is feasible. Ridiculous, but feasible. So, you need to know what priors you are willing to struggle for, and you should struggle for them, because no bill in India, no law in India passes without public consultation. Yes, the public is barely aware, and yes, a very small fraction of the public writes letters, and yes, I don't know what happens to those letters, whether they are read or thrown into the dustbin. But if you have not written those letters, unlike me, then you don't get to complain, right? So pushing back hard when liberty is compromised is something that the technology community needs to do more of.
Any other questions? At the very last.
I'm completing my 10,000 steps today.
You said that apathy is the worst enemy for civilization, but the problem is that even when you say that, half of the people even here will be apathetic after they leave. So what can be done to remedy that?
That's a very good question. So I'm going to give you a bit of political theory. Okay? Asking people to do things because of their morality or because of their internal value system or whatever, it's called voluntarism, that I expect you to volunteer to do something. I am not a voluntarist, okay, at all. I am not saying that you should do these things because of the goodness of your heart and, go like ruin your life fighting for the larger cause, etc., etc. I'm not going to even try to do that, because most of you, the computer science ones, are always like thinking कि paycheck कितना ज़्यादा आएगा, तो मुझे पता है how reality works. However, I would ask you to look at enlightened self-interest. Enlightened self-interest is the core pillar of Marxism. So it's a bit different from that individual wala enlightened self-interest. Do you like the air you breathe? Similarly, do you like social freedom? It's like the air you breathe. So the society you live in will change as technology advances unless you intervene, and if you don't, then you will live in a society where the means of production would be controlled by a very, very small fraction of people, and you would be wage workers for them when it comes to technology. That is not a nice way to live, to put it in plain language. Okay, so yes, sure, you can be apathetic, but then you are signing away your future. Already it is happening. We have something called smart cities. How many of you have heard the phrase smart cities? How many of you know what a smart city is? So yes, essentially doing your existence. So don't be apathetic. It is bad for your enlightened self-interest.
I think in other words, you're saying that apathy is a very expensive proposition.
Yes.
So I think interesting that you also brought up the example of air and water, and in a sense, our freedom to program is, that's the commons. The freedom to program is part of the commons, and we realize the value of the commons when, in its absence, when the air is polluted, we realize the value of fresh air. When the water supply is reduced to a trickle, we realize the value of water. Similarly, I think at this point in time, we are fighting the apathy against software patenting. So it's a bit of a struggle. But one last quick question for you before we conclude. What would be your advice to engineers who want to switch into public policy?
In short, read what goes around, be aware of the world, then read something a little heavier. Read, if you can, philosophy and political theory. It is way more accessible than it sounds. See, seriously, try to get to know the world a little more. Try to be curious about people as much as you are curious about things. If machines make you fascinated, people should also make you fascinated. How the world works should make you fascinated, because how the world works is not some academic interest separate from you. You are connected to it. You are a human person who lives in this reality, right? And if you then want to actually shift into public policy, like if you want to do tech policy for a living, my suggestion would be first be very good at what you are technically. Like I wanted to do AI and policy, mera saaf tha. I don't pretend I know other technical systems. I don't know how cryptography works. Whenever you guys start talking about quantum, मुझे डर लगने लगता है. मुझे quantum word से डर लगने लगता है. ठीक है? तो मुझे नहीं आता वो. मुझे AI आता है. मुझे machine learning आता है. So be very good technically at what you want to do policy at. I'm not saying do a PhD, but at least do a master's. I think that's like bare minimum these days to be like good at a field. And then if you want to shift to public policy, in my time there were no such degrees, but now there are two degrees. There is Masters in Public Policy, which even IIT Bombay has, and there is a PhD, which is an advanced research degree, right? So if you want to shift to public policy, one route is the academic route. You do a MPP, you do a PhD, you do something like that. The other route goes through think tanks like organizations which Venki here works for. There are many think tanks which work on public policy. These people are called practitioners. So you can practice the art of public policy on the ground and get your skills that way, or you can do it through academia. There is a third way also which is evolving these days, which is the corporate field. Many big companies have public policy roles because but those are like, paltu lawyers, like those are to like navigate difficult people like us. So those are like, okay, ठीक है, तुम ये बोलो, हम ये बोलते हैं. But yes, it's a much more vibrant field than it was in my era. I don't have a public policy degree. I only have computer science degrees. But now people do, and now if you are interested, of course, if anybody is personally interested to communicate with me or to other faculty members at Center for Policy Studies, we always respond to emails. Of course, that's a lie. I'm sorry, no professor responds to emails on time, but eventually responds to emails. And of course, you can always meet me at my office if you want, okay, now seriously, how to do public policy. You come to my office, I'll tell you how to do it. So,
with that, thank you so much, Anupam. I think thanks for this very interesting talk.